And my name's Dr. Selena Pierman. Thanks for joining us for this segment regarding Chapter 1 for our BA312 Analysis of Organizational Behavior. It is an absolute pleasure to share some thoughts with you about this week's reading content. We'll do this in two parts. Chapter 1 in this presentation, Chapter 2 in the next presentation. What I'm hoping that you'll gain from our time through this electronic format is just maybe some key ideas or highlights that as you take on the reading, that we look both at the research and the data and then apply them to our own experience. I'm going to want to continue to challenge you to do that throughout this course. Let's take a look at some key ideas that come up in Chapter 1. Some of the things we know about organizations are that as we live, we spend a lot of time in organizations. If you really think about it, right, most people are born and educated in organizations. Most people acquire most of our material possessions from organizations. We also die as members of organizations. So this whole concept of bringing two or more people together for that common goal is pervasive throughout our entire life. We also recognize that most of our activities are also regulated by governmental organizations. It's been my own experience that how we bring people together to accomplish that common goal is just fascinating. There's no one way to do it. There's so many ways to do it. And yet what we'll discover in this course is there are definitely some more effective ways to do it than others. Take a look at the organizations around you, not only the ones you work in, but maybe even the ones you volunteer in. Think about anywhere that you do business. Pay attention to some of those dynamics of what does that look like? How large, how small, what their structure looks like, what their mission, their vision, their branding looks like. How have they decided to work together effectively or not? So when we look at organizations, we know that we spend most of our time in. So in this class, we want to take a look at how the individual interacts with the organization. And that interface there in the middle of this illustration really looks at, we come to the organization as that individual. It interacts with the organization, and now we have that behavior, which is always interacting with our environment. One of the things that I love about people and behavior is my response or reaction to my environment. I do something, my environment gives me some response. That was a good choice. That was not such a good choice, right? But behavior itself is always interacting with the environment around us. So as we begin exploring in this course, everything from communication, motivation, leadership, trust, emotion and well-being, ability to adjust to stress and change, all of these topics raise these issues of what is the behavior and how is it responding and reacting to the environment around us. Interesting with this particular study because organizational behavior itself really has its roots in a number of different kinds of fields. So what we're trying to do is explain how complex human behavior is in organizations. We want to think about what opportunities and problems and challenges and issues come up. We want to really think about what does this mean for us in supervisory roles, as leaders in organizations, or even as team members as we work across groups. It does look at the human relations side of the business. We have to take great care of our fiscal resources and our physical resources, but this course focuses on our human resources and the behavior aspect of that. There's a couple other things we want to think about within the discipline of organizational behavior. Studying this for this course helps us just get better insights to why others in the organization behave as they do. Think about coworkers you've had in the past where you just went, oh, what are they thinking? Right? Have you ever had one of those? Just checking. I've had several. Or just the way we interact. Who demonstrates what kind of behaviors based on what kind of personality and experience and learning they've had in their own background. When you start watching behavior around you, I'm a little biased, but there's just nothing more fun than just really trying to figure out why people do what they do. Okay, maybe that's my personal passion, but for this course at least, I want you doing that. I want you to think about how needs and motives drive behavior. how feelings, and just even where we are in our career, what our personal life is, the meaning of work, why we work, all of those things. What we also understand is that we need to look at what's called attitudinal processes, how we shape those behaviors towards a goal. So when someone says to me, oh, what an attitude, in US business culture, that's usually not a positive statement. But one of the things I always say is attitude about what? Good attitude about the day, bad attitude about my supervisor, good attitude about this task, bad attitude about that client. So processes, just as individuals, groups, between group dynamics, inner group dynamics, organizational culture, power, and politics. We're going to talk about all of those throughout this course, as well as how that organization interacts with people outside of the organization, which in business we call stakeholders, anybody who has a vested interest in the continued success of our organization. So how do we interact with people outside of our company? One of the ways to look at contemporary organizational behavior is that it is interdisciplinary in focus. So many of the research articles that you'll be able to find as part of our work in this course come out of both business and psychology, with a little bit of sociology thrown in there. It really comes originally out of more of the philosophy, psychology, sociology studies. There's a little bit of political science and religion in there, and not religion for the pure sense, but just understanding how behavior happens and how it's guided by values. There have been many, many ways that this field has developed over the years. It is interdisciplinary in focus, and yet it has really become its own area of focus. It is also descriptive in nature. So the idea behind that is it's really hard to get pure experimental conditions when you're studying humans in groups. Think about this. If I were to walk into your organization and start watching everybody taking notes on a clipboard, would their behavior change? Humans just do. As soon as we start doing something to them, there's always going to be a response. So many of the studies and research pieces you'll be looking at in this course are descriptive. This population, this company, this was what was seen, experienced, etc. It's not that we can't do good scientific research in this field. You'll see some of that research in this course. It has to be done a little bit differently. It is also systems-based. So here's what I want you thinking about as we get started with the material this week. Any organization is an open system. It is a dynamic entity that as soon as you pull on one part of the system, other parts of the system feel it. So all of our study is systems-based. Any team, any organization, we've got to look at it in context. So we can look at an individual, we can look at a team, but we always have to think about how it's being influenced by the system around it. Let's look at a few more things. We're going to look at 3 levels of study. The individual processes. So this is what motivates us. It could be stress, decision-making, how it affects our productivity, performance, absenteeism, attitude, turnover, and stress. All of those things are individual level. We also look at it at the interpersonal level. So this is groups, teams, leadership, conflict. This is, again, team productivity, team performance, norms, how we do things here, cohesion, how tight are we as a team, as well as group satisfaction. In general, how satisfied are employees working in your organization? How do they feel about leadership? How would they describe the culture? Those are things we'll look at in this class. The last area is that organizational level. Again, this is as an entire entity, the design. How tall are we in structure or flat are we in structure? How centralized or decentralized? What is our culture like and how do we adjust to change? Some of those other ones are productivity, performance, again, turnover, just how we survive as an organization, as well as stakeholder satisfaction. Pop quiz, I just defined that a slide or two ago. Anybody who has a vested interest in our continued success as a company. So those are 3 levels of study that as you look at the text material and you apply that to our discussions, it might be an individual process, might be a team process, or it might be an entire organizational process. I mentioned just a minute ago, and I want to mention it briefly here as well. Again, we're looking at this from a systems perspective, so we're looking at all the different parts of an organization, and yet it's always interaction, based on interaction. So it's actually called interactionalism. Awkward word for the fact that the individual and the situation are always creating the behavior. So for example, have you noticed that if work starts at 8 o'clock, there are different definitions of 8 o'clock, right? There are some people who define 8 o'clock as 25 minutes early, staring everybody else down like you're late. There are some people who are scooting in the parking lot almost to the workstation by 8. And there are some folks who are like 8:10. Now, if 8:10's working for me and nobody says anything and it's not an issue and I don't get disciplined for it or nobody talks to me, chances are I'm going to keep coming in late. I'm going to keep coming at 8:10 because that's my definition. So if nobody says anything to me and it's working for me, then chances are that interaction to the individual and the situation is going to continue to produce that behavior. Now, if the definition is 8 o'clock means 8 o'clock means you're to your workstation ready to work, then we might need to redefine that 8:10-ish. The idea is this: no matter how complex the behavior, it's always interacting with the environment behind us and around us and above us, everywhere. So this week, I really want you paying attention with any group, any organization you spend time with. As you look at that behavior, ask yourself, why is that happening? Might be individual, might be group, might be something wider in the environment. There's so many levels to that, and we'll explore. So some key topics and considerations as you look at chapter 1. One of our biggest issues these days is human and social capital. We've got so much information up in our brains. Doesn't matter what kind of profession you're in. I see it in all areas of work, whether it's service industry, whether it's production, manufacturing environments, whether it's healthcare, education, doesn't matter. We got a lot of stuff contained up here. So pay attention to some of that information on knowledge workers. Think about your own area in how that information actually gets transferred. How many people hold that information and don't share it? Think about some of the planning we need to do in the coming years with the amounts of retirements coming up and how much information is contained in their heads that the rest of us need to know for any of us who are working for the next 20, 30 years. How we just get done, how we get results through other people. So how we get work done, that issue of management, which is planning, directing, controlling, and organizing, as well as leadership, how we inspire and motivate people to get performance. So we're going to look at that. We'll also look at some of the future leader. So what's it going to take for leaders to be effective going forward? We know some things, the fact that leadership still matters. And if we're not leading our teams, they're following someone. It just may not be the person you want them following. So what do leaders need to be prepared for? Whether you're in a formal leadership role now, you're influencing other people. So we want to think about, what does this mean for us in the coming years as professionals? How do we impact our workplaces in even better ways? We also know that there's more emphasis these days on both ethics and corporate social responsibility. So take a look at that in your reading, see how that applies. The last thing I want to highlight for this particular video is just really understanding how this fits into our text. So look at that external environment, again in the organization, and you have these areas of components. So managers and team leaders responsible for achieving results with and through others, individual behavior, group and social processes, organizational level, those 3 outcomes we talked about, get us to organizational effectiveness through continuous improvement. One of the things I want us thinking about as professionals, no matter what our job is, no matter how much work experience we've had, or if we're brand new to the workforce, this is about our continuous improvement. I want us to be better today than we were yesterday, better tomorrow than we are today. So I'm going to leave you with this thought as we wrap up chapter 1. It's a Chinese proverb I've followed for a number of years, and I have it posted here in my office. If you want prosperity for a year, grow grain. If you want prosperity for 10 years, grow trees. And if you want prosperity for a lifetime, grow people. Organizations are an integral part of our everyday life. People, however, are critical to organizational success. So we want to look at, how do we help make organizations more effective when they really are a sum of their parts of all the individuals that come to interact with that organization, and yet they become so much more. Thanks for joining us on this journey. I look forward to the continued conversation, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.